People really should have listened to this interview before they began theorizing about Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire. In this interview, the creator, George R.R. Martin, basically killed a lot of theories about his world, namely about the Great Empire of the Dawn. If you don't know, this theory proposes that the mythical empire from the east was not just a myth, and that they conquered dragons before the Valyrian freehold did, leaving their trace all over A Song of Ice and Fire. However, in this interview, George revealed that a lot of the lore for Eastern Essos was just filler he made up after he published the map book, which means he never had the Great Empire of the Dawn in mind as he wrote A Song of Ice and Fire.
On the edge of the map, on the edge of all the maps that I had drawn up to that point, was the city of Qarth, where Dany reaches and has adventures, and then she turns around. But there's a scene in one of the books where Xaro's own Doxos comes to Dany, and he presents her with a huge tapestry of the world, in which the city Qarth is at the center. This, of course, implies that there's as much to the east of Qarth as there is to the west of Qarth. But then, I had blank pages east of Qarth, so I filled it in, making as much east of Qarth as was west of Qarth, so we could have maps of it. So the map book comes out, and I've done all this time inventing cities and mountains and filling in maps. And I think I'm never going to have to worry about it. Well, here comes the World of Ice and Fire. And here comes the notes, well, what about Yeti? We need an article about Yeti. So now I'm writing entire articles on the history of these places that I kind of had to invent in order to have something on the map, because I said the tapestry I had Qarth in the middle.
So there you have it. Yeti's Great Empire of the Dawn was simply an afterthought. It was never in George's mind as he wrote A Song of Ice and Fire. In fact, it wasn't even in mind when he published The Lands of Ice and Fire back in 2012. The Great Empire of the Dawn was conceptualized afterward solely for the World of Ice and Fire, and all because George forgot he had a throwaway line suggesting that there was more land to the east of Qarth, which really says a lot about how insignificant the Great Empire of the Dawn is to the story. However, this all should have been obvious. The Great Empire of the Dawn is never mentioned in the main novels, and is only mentioned 3 times in the World Book. The same World Book which provides plenty of hints to other ancient civilizations, such as the Deep Ones and Maze Makers, who could have been responsible for all the ancient structures people want to attribute to the Great Empire of the Dawn. Yet there's also the notion that this Great Empire explains all the contradictions in the chronological history, such as advanced weapons being forged before the technology was invented. Well, George already clarified all this. He said the Long Night, for example, happened closer to 5,000 years ago and not 10,000, basically compressing the timeline, explaining most contradictions in the chronology of history. And just to be clear, this is not a retcon. As George himself said, he had maesters hinting at this in the books for quite some time. It seems he just realized everyone was making the wrong conclusion, and so he had to clarify the timeline himself. I already analyzed each aspect of the Great Empire of the Dawn in another video, and the theory just does not hold up to scrutiny. In fact, the very reason there is so much speculation about this theory is because there are so many holes in it. It leads to more questions than answers, which allows many to contribute, which in turn leads to more questions and invites further discussion and speculation. This theory is basically a collaborative writing project at this point, rivaling the likes of the SCP Foundation. It's fanfiction gone out of control, and after all these years, most supporters of this theory are suffering from the sunk cost fallacy. They're in too deep to ever turn back, because if you ever question their theory, you're met with vitriol and hostility. Yet, if the theory was so strong, wouldn't they welcome any scrutiny? The sheer emotion with which they respond says otherwise. So I simply await the next book, which I believe will conclusively shut the door on the Great Empire of the Dawn. Because with more and more information that comes out, whether it be through the cancelled prequel or leaks from House of the Dragon, new evidence always seems to be going the opposite direction from the Great Empire of the Dawn. It's only a matter of time till they can't deny it anymore.